All right, in this video, I want to show you how I added a 4.5-foot butcher block to our kitchen island. Now, the first thing I did was actually cut the piece that I ordered from Home Depot down to size, which I didn't videotape. I didn't realize I was going to make a video on it until I kind of started, and then I got interested in the project. So once I cut it down to the proper size, I went ahead and I routed. Now, a couple things. One, I am not a professional woodworker. I'm a hobbyist at best and a complete amateur. This is only the fourth or fifth time I've ever used a router before, so I'm by no means an expert at this. But I did route every side to try to match how the edges of the honed marble went. So it turned out pretty good. Again, I made a couple mistakes, but nothing that I really think anyone else will notice besides me. So then after I routed it, what I did was took a piece that I cut off to measure the proper height for the bracket. Now this L bracket I got from Amazon, and I will put a link in the description to it. And here I'm just trying to get a general sense of the proper height, and then for the bracket and where the holes need to go. So here I'm using a punch to go ahead and punch the center of those holes, so when I go to use my bit, it won't slip on me. Now they do make an automatic metal punch, but I had one of these. I had this laying around. And I thought this worked out really well. Now, because I'm drilling into the side of an MDF cabinet, I needed to be very careful about the distance and the depth that I drilled. The drill bit would go about halfway in, and then I'd have to take it out and clean the drill bit and the hole out because it wasn't drilling anymore. I'm using a Forstner bit, which I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, for the first time. So I purchased this over at Home Depot, and it worked really well to put these inserts in. So I drilled that out at 3/8, which it recommended for a soft wood and MDF, which this is. And then I inserted these inserts in there that will screw in these hard to find screws that I'll show you guys when I'm putting them in here. And I will put links to all these things in the description as well. And so the problem is that the screw that Amazon recommended when I ordered it was longer than the actual insert. So I would drill the insert hole at 3/8. Then I would come in with just a regular drill bit, and drill it deeper than that. And you can see this looks really smooth underneath. Not that anyone besides myself will ever know that it's there. But, there you go. It actually turned out really nice. So here you can see the process again. I just take the punch, give it a light whack, pull it out. Then I'm going to drill the insert. And then from there, I can go ahead and make sure that I collect everything's inserted properly. Now, I will say that this made a mess, so the vacuum cleaner was really important. And you see how I used the tape there to make sure I set the depth properly. I would recommend making sure you actually tighten these in by hand. You don't want to come in with an electric screwdriver to tighten those inserts down because you may go a little too far. Now, a lot of people on these recommend that you do a countersink on it. I didn't have to do that here because, as you can see, the marble sticks out a little bit past, so I wasn't too worried about it. And here I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I have two of these brackets. They come in a pair, and again, I'll link it in the description. These are really heavy duty. I didn't know what to order, so I just ordered a bunch from Amazon, and then I just decided what would work the best in the long run. These were really heavy duty. Might have been a little bit of overkill, but I liked the way these looked the best. And I knew that they would be strong enough to hold it. Hopefully, I never take this thing off. And so here you can see I'm setting the depth. My son and his buddy came in to give me a hand, trying to get it in there and make sure everything was level as I was tightening down this bracket. So here what I'm using is a laser level to get the exact height of the top of the L brackets. the reason I did this was the cabinet makers gave me a hollow post to actually put the end on. So I'm measuring how far back I want it to be from the cabinet itself. So it's just a single post that's hollow. It's like, it was 4.5 inches diameter. And so then I just put my tape measure up and measured exactly how the distance that I wanted to cut that post down to. The laser level made it so much easier. I borrowed it from my neighbor and it was great. And here I am. This is your first look at the post that I'm cutting. I did this on my, I did this with this saw here. I regret doing this a little bit. I think it would have turned out a little bit better had I used a hand saw. And then here is the bracket that's actually going to go inside. And what I'm doing here is notching out a space for the bracket to go, because as you'll see later a bit in the video, I'm going to put a 2x4, two 2x4s in the hollow hole here. And so I want to make sure that the top of the bracket is even with the top of the faux post, if you will. So I get my jigsaw out. This is the part that I probably have my first regret. I should have waited and done this in the morning. I was trying to do this after a long day of work, and it was getting dark outside, as you can see, and it just didn't turn out as well as I had hoped. Again, it's underneath. No one will ever see it, but in the long run, I kind of regret it. So here I'm cutting down the 2x4s to the proper size. I think it was about 24 3/8. And so I cut 2 of them, and then I went ahead and attached those with some screws, which was great. And this is definitely going to be strong enough to hold it together. So now I had the 2 brackets. These, again, I got on Amazon, and I'll put a link together. These are shelf brackets, and it worked out really, really well here. They were really sturdy. For the piece that went to the 2x4, there were 3 holes. I ended up putting 2 screws in them, but I had to offset them so the screws wouldn't bump into each other when they were going in. This caused some problems later on when I was trying to get them lined up. It won't show in the video, but it took me a little bit longer than I'd wished it had to make that happen. Now, the screws that I have to actually attach to the wood that'll go on from the top here, they were too thick for that. So I had to come in and bore those out a little bit. So here, me and my wife are going to figure out where we want the actual post to go. And this is for comfort, because we wanted to make sure that our knees, when we're sitting at the end, wouldn't be slamming into it, but we also needed it to be secure. So we tried to find a good balance. I think we left 14.5 inches from where the post stops to the end of the board, and so far it's turned out great. So here I'm getting ready to mark where this is, so I can always make sure when I go to drill the holes, how to put it back in. Now, I really regret, I wish I would have made some marks on here so I knew which side was which. It would have just made some things easier. Put a north and a south next to it or something like that. So the depth of this is pretty close to what the depth of the MDF was, so I was able to use the same screws here. I chose not to put a C channel in here, which I've seen a number of people do. I follow a couple people who do tables like this on YouTube, and they're really big with C channels. We'll see in the long run if I regret it. It's hard to say. Who knows? Here I am boring out those holes to make the screws that are going there a little bit bigger, so it'll go in better. So here I'm just drilling, again, the depth. I'm really making sure that I mark the depth of those drills so I don't drill all the way through. And so here I'm going to go ahead and put the inserts in again. And again, I'll have a link for these on the bottom. These are what a number of people recommended. So here's me giving it its first try. I have the post in place, and I'm setting this in there for the first time now. I don't show this in the video, but I did have to go back and re-notch it the next day. So then I had the family help me bring this in for the first time. This is all walnut. Cost about 600 bucks, I think, at Home Depot. And it was heavy, and trying to, put it in place in the best way I can. It was much easier to do with the family giving me a nice helping hand there. And some of you may remember my son from my video where I installed the bidet, and he had jokes as soon as I left the camera rolling unsupervised. So what we're trying to do here is just make sure the heights and everything's lined up, in particular down below. Now, because the post had a inside diameter of 4.5, it did wiggle a little bit, and I kept trying to figure out how to stop that from happening. But you'll see it at the end of the video how I ended up coming up with the way to do it. We'll see how long it lasts. Worst case scenario, I'm going to put 2 screws on either side to try to find that middle brace there, to make sure that it lasts a long time in that position. From people, it's going to get kicked, things are going to get bounced around. So here what I'm doing is I'm putting the screws underneath to make sure that they fit, and just lock it into place because it was getting late at night. I was extremely tired, so me and my son went ahead and put the screws in. So the last thing I did for the night was to mark the holes where I needed to put the inserts for the bottom there. And then the next day I went ahead and got started on it. We had a little more light and I wasn't as tired. So again, this is the same process as I did before. I'm going to go ahead and drill to put the inserts in. So this actually ended up being a little trickier than I had hoped, because once I had everything drilled and I put the first insert in, you'll see I actually have to take it out because it didn't countersink. So the lip was just sticking a little high, and I didn't want to put so much pressure on it that it ended up breaking the walnut here. They said for a harder surface or harder wood like this, you might want to drill a little bit bigger, but I didn't have another one of those bits that was slightly bigger. So I ended up coming up with a different solution. And what I did there was I went ahead and I didn't have a countersink bit that was bigger than 3/8 either. So you can see here what I did was I grabbed a 3/8 drill and I kind of bored it out at the top. And this did 2 things. One, it made the hole just a little bit bigger, so I wasn't as worried about the wood splitting. And it allowed it to be it allowed the insert to countersink, which turned out to be great. And so once I had everything vacuumed, I sanded it down a little bit, and then I went ahead and put the inserts in, and it worked really, really well. And again, the holes on the bracket, the diameter of them is bigger than the diameter of the screw, the hidden screw that I was using. And so that was really, really nice because that gave me some flexibility to move it in every dimension that I would want. So then this thing was ready to be prepped. And so I went ahead and I sanded it down first with a 150 grit sandpaper. And the guy that I talked to, the stain that I used, recommended using a 180 or a 220. I didn't have a 180, so I started off with a 150 and then I went to 220. I was a little bit worried about going that fine of a grit, that maybe the stain wouldn't take, but it did take, and it actually turned out looking pretty nice. So here what I'm doing is I want to be able to put the post in a little more permanently than just having it sit there. So what I did was I drilled through the slate tile. I put 2 holes in the slate tile, and then I switched to another drill bit, and that'll just go through the plywood that's underneath the floor. And the cool thing is then I could drill I could put a screw, and I'll show you this in a little bit, from underneath in the basement. I can actually drill up to there, and that worked out really, really nice. Again, I'm a little bit crazy about vacuuming, keeping everything clean. So you can see here, I went ahead and I just took a piece of 14 gauge wire, tied a knot in it, and then dropped it down through the floor so I could find the hole. This was really important because I could have looked forever and I would have never ever been able to see the hole there. You can see the red little wire right there hanging down, and that gave me a nice position to where I could go and find it later. So here I'm tightening it down. I'm doing a dry run. I had a buddy come over, took him out for lunch, and he helped me lift it up here. This is Mark. He's a good dude, and he's really a pretty handy guy as well. And so it was nice to have somebody to kind of talk to about this and bounce ideas off about the best way to get everything lined up. It's always good to have somebody to bounce ideas off, and Mark's the best at that. So you can see here, we have so many different things we want to line up. I want the top of the butcher block to line up with the top. And then I want the edges to be perfect. I cut this, I think it was like 35 and a quarter. That's the width on here. And so this is where if I had done a better job marking things the night before, it would have been easier to line this up at the bottom. What Mark and I just decided to do was, hey, let's just attach the bottom, and then we can get it in there permanently, and then after that we can the whole thing will kind of move, and we can get it adjusted, dead nuts on the other end. So again, a lot of finagling, a lot of moving, trying this. We had to flip it around a couple times. Very annoyed with myself. You can see here I'm turning it around to make sure I get in the right direction. So I had to turn it, 180 degrees to get it all lined up. But eventually I did, and it worked out really nice. Again, there's no way I could have done this by myself, so it's great to have somebody there with me to help me out when needed. It was now time to put the post in and just lock these in. We went pretty snug with them. It wasn't an arm wrestling competition, but we got all the fasteners in there. It looked really, really good, actually, so I was real pleased with that. So before I stained it, I pulled it off a little bit, made sure I had a gap between the marble and the walnut, and then I went ahead and wiped it down with a lightly damped rag. Everyone said that I've read said that would pull the grain out a little bit, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't know, but everyone said to do it, so I did that. I let it dry. And then I went ahead and I applied the stain. Now, this stain is FDA approved for butcher blocks, so there's supposed to be no contamination on food. So if we actually want to cut things on here, we got the stain, and now we have the look that we were going. We went with a dark walnut from Tried and True. I got this on Amazon, and I will put a link to this in the bottom. I think it turned out, the look came out really nice. They say to put a really thin coat on it, and I tried my best, but it was pretty tricky to get a thin coat because the stuff's pretty thick, and I didn't want to thin it out at all because the manufacturer didn't recommend that. So I went ahead and I put it on, and then I waited 8 minutes and wiped it off. Then I waited 8 hours to come in, and me and my daughter then permanently attached the bracket to it. We started to get things in there, and I was trying to show her righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, as you can imagine, is pretty important to learn, I think. And then I had them, my son and my daughter, apply pressure against the marble to get everything lined up. Again, this was the final connection here, so I wanted to make sure that it was as lined up as it could be. And honestly, I'm just really pleased with how that turned out. It came out really nice. I think the height was good. And the distances on each end were really good. And it gave me the opportunity to show my daughter how to use an Allen wrench and to kind of screw things in, which is always a pretty fun idea that I like to do with my kids, try to show them how to do some of these things. Now it was time to get the post kind of locked in there. I don't love the way I did this. We'll see how long it lasts. Maybe it lasts for 30 years. Maybe the first time somebody looks at it, it won't work. But what I did was I lined the post up with one of the grout lines in the tile, and then I put shims in there to kind of lock it in place. And I didn't have a video of that, but I have a video of me cutting the shims down, and it's really solid. I mean, I'm not going to moonwalk on it, but it's pretty, I think it's pretty solid. So here I just went in and with some deck screws and drilled those in from the bottom to get it to hold in place a little bit. And here's the finished product. And all around, I am just really, really happy. I will say I really liked this tried and true stain. I was around it for a while and it had a smell, but I never got a headache or anything. And I love the color. It is taking a long time to dry. Now, you know, I'm in the Midwest. The temperature is getting, it's pretty cold out, and it's been like raining and snowing a little bit. And so I don't know if that's affecting how long it's taking to dry, but we're just not wearing any like white clothes by it or anything, and I'm wiping it down quite a lot. But all in all, I'm just really pleased with the outcome, and hopefully my family and I will be able to enjoy this for many years to come. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, please, 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 please put them in the comment section. Again, I'm not a professional woodworker. I'm a hobbyist at best, and probably a pretty below average hobbyist at that. So if I got anything wrong or if you have any suggestions, please feel free to add them to the comments. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks.
Ow! You stepped on my foot.
What?
What's wrong?
Let's go back to it.
Coconut.
They're up here. I go for that.
Coconut. Mimi.
Hmm?
Is it backwards?
No, I might have. Let me see. Okay, I'm over here on the street.
Yummy. Yummy.